You may or may not have heard of the concept of positional play in relation to Mikel Arteta's tactical setup, and indeed the tactical setup of numerous other coaches, including famously Pep Guardiola. Here are the fundamentals of what it is, some examples in practice, and why you should care. Positional play, Positionsspiel in German, or Juego de Posición as it's known in Spanish, is a tactical approach that gives a team a set of very specific principles and guidelines, pointing towards an ultimate goal: superiorities on the field. In other words, putting a team in more situations that means they can control the game, keep the ball, and score more goals. Complicated as it sometimes appears, its aim is simple. Think of it as a way of systemizing something that is kind of intuitive. There are many different types of superiorities or dominant situations that this system tries to get you into, but I'll tell you about the main three: positional, qualitative, and quantitative or numerical. Number 1, positional. Situations where players are in positions on the pitch that exploit space or create attacking threat, such as between the defensive and midfield line. Coached automations that are a fundamental of positional play. Number 2, qualitative. Situations where you can show your quality, isolating weaker opponents 1v1, or capitalizing on the skill set of a particularly fast winger or penetrative midfield passer. Number 3, quantitative or numerical. A situation where you may have isolated a team 2v1 or 3v2, for example, and are able to overload them numbers-wise to create attacking threat. Considering it's called positional play in relation to the players, this is almost counterintuitive, but it's important to remember that this set of principles are centered around keeping and moving the ball.
How important was the movement of your players today?
Move the ball. Looks like it's the move and the players, but the move is the ball. The people believe, oh, how they move? No. But the move is the ball. Everybody has to be in the position. When you move much, it's not good. The ball comes where we are. We don't go where to pick up the ball. It's completely different.
The players must move smartly in coached, intelligent patterns. The ball comes to you in the right place, not the other way around, so you tire out the opposition. Perfection is the right movements of the ball at pace and the right manipulation of the opponent and space in tandem in order to create as many of the superiorities as possible within the same move. 2 more things to note. Firstly, in positional play, a ground rule is to never have more than 2 players in any one vertical line and no more than 3 players in any horizontal line. This is a rule of thumb, you won't always see it, but it's a rule implemented to try and cover as much of the pitch as possible as a starting point from which you can make your next movements. It's also why teams who play with these principles often play 4-3-3 or 3-4-3, setups that help you cover space. It helps the players know how to respond to each other's movements as well. If the fullback tucks in, that's too many on a vertical line, and someone needs to respond. And secondly, not always, but most teams who employ these principles try to dominate the ball. Because of that, a ground rule of a positional play team tends to be trying to create as many passing options for the player in possession as is possible to hold onto the ball. They try and stand between the defensive players to receive and not hide in the cover shadow. This is known as the mutual help space. And in Sunday League terms, it's "give me options!" What I'm about to show you are examples, systemized to make sense to the players. Also, all of these are idealized situations. In reality, the opponent will be much more aware of these patterns of movement. Positional superiority. The basic. Yellow team here are using these principles and are looking to build up from the back in a 4-3-3. The opponent is in a 4-4-2 mid block. The central zone is packed, so the yellows are coached what to do next. The fullback, number 2, tucks in, dragging the opponent's left winger inside, as number 11 wants to stop number 2 receiving the ball. Yellow's number 7 knows what he should do the moment he sees number 2 invert, and enters the vacated space with an extra second or 2 because of it. He creates the passing lane, and the ball gets progressed from number 4. Number 7 progresses it against an isolated fullback. Number 10 inside waits for the wall pass, and 7 and 9 can then give him 2 options in a triangle. Regardless, the ball can go forward again, and the players are between the lines. This is positional superiority. Secondary and tertiary movements are coached around the ball in order to be in a better position to receive and progress the ball than the opponent is to defend it in as many situations as possible. Numerical superiority. Take this situation. All of the red team's progression options are man-marked, so you have to manipulate space to create a numerical superiority, somehow getting 2v1 rather than 1v1. A good way to do that would be that your number 9 drops into midfield, so you drag their centre-back, number 4, out of position a touch, creating space in behind. 11 and 3 responding as soon as they see that. 11 enters the vacated space, dragging another defender, opposition number 2 over. Number 3 keeps running into the space created, and number 10 is alert. A high-quality centre-back, red number 5, can loft the ball to your fullback who, along with red number 10, has responded to that space moving around previously. You're then 2v1 with a numerical superiority as the defenders have been dragged out of position. This is why you need players who are comfortable in different zones of the pitch, and why Arsenal are signing the players they are at the moment. Jesus can operate basically anywhere across the front line, as well as dropping deep, and he would have been the 9 in that situation, probably now heading back into the box to receive the ball from wide. You want fullbacks who can invert and go wide with no loss of technical quality like Zinchenko, and midfielders who can receive the ball in any which way like Odegaard and Vieira. You can then find yourself overloading with more quality and volume. Qualitative superiority. Imagine that their left back isn't very good and your right back, number 2, is great 1v1. Basically, they have Kolasinac. The ball is in the midfield with number 6 for the blue team, who are playing with a slightly lopsided fullback, their number 2 further up, and their wide men trying to stretch the compact orange team's 4-3-3 block. 7 inverts and 2 goes to the exterior, creating a moment of doubt in the opposition number 3's mind. 10 finds the ball in the midfield. 10's quality finds 7 on the ball in the interior, and number 7 finds number 2 moving the ball quickly. Number 2 is excellent 1v1, so you have yourself a qualitative superiority and would likely beat the opponent's number 3. Note the relative lack of movement when on the ball. All of this manipulation of space, crucially using the ball's movement to get forward and bypass an opponent, means you get into these situations more regularly. Also note that these situations require quality. Number 10 in the last example, the centre-back in the second. That's why Arteta's football has improved as the players have become more suitable. I also can't stress enough the importance of the third man in every situation. There's the player on the ball, the player they're playing it to, but it's the tertiary movement of the third man that makes all the difference. What space is vacated and who can move into it. Positional play originates in concepts outlined in Total Football by Rinus Michels and Johan Cruyff. It's all over the place, and the concepts in different forms can be seen in a whole host of top teams. The thing with positional play is, if you can get it right, it's very, very hard to defend, because every player knows exactly what to do in every single situation. Take this example of Kieran Tierney talking about it in an interview with Sky Sports.
He knows what's going to happen in a game, and how it's going to happen, and what you should do, and where you're going to get pressed from, and where your options should be. Like, you should know where the left mid's going to be, or the centre mid, so you can just play like in sync. Everybody's a one brain, and I think that's perfect. And
because the players are so reactive to each other, they rarely miss a moment to exploit something. So it is indeed total football. You may have seen a pitch drawn like this before. In fact, you did earlier. This was Guardiola's big innovation. It helps clarify the spaces players are expected to be in even further. It makes it more automated, more mechanical, more perfect, but ultimately promotes freedom. You have it literally laid out under your feet, which lane you should be in at what time. The time on the training ground is spent coaching those automations. Winger into half space, full back into lane 5. The defender is there with that body shape, so I should be here ready to receive on this foot. Once those automations are in place, you get the feeling of the one brain that gets spoken about. So that's the fundamentals of positional play, not going too deep. In practice, it's harder to spot the patterns, harder to see the benefits of, and much, much harder to coach. We're all here because we love Arsenal, and we want Arsenal to win. So how does positional play help Arsenal get better on the pitch? In what way does an awareness of these concepts actually clarify and help us understand how Arteta's Arsenal play in practice? And what examples can we see? To do that, I wanted to welcome one of the top up-and-coming tactical analysts in the Arsenal media space, Rohan Jivan. Rohan is going to show us positional play in practice for Arsenal.
So, number 1, numerical superiority, and this is essentially having more players in one area of the pitch in comparison to the opposition. And as you can see on your screen right now, in the build-up to Arsenal's opening goal against Southampton at the Emirates Stadium last season, Arsenal structured in what looks like a 2-4-4 shape versus Southampton's high-pressing 4-4-2. And you can see in that first phase, Arsenal have 7 players occupying certain zones across the pitch. Now, immediately, Arsenal have a man advantage. They have a 7 versus 6 in their favour, and therefore a numerical superiority, which means that if the ball is moved from side to side quickly, players are making the right decisions on the ball under pressure, progression past that first phase is available. And that's exactly what happens in this situation, with Bukayo Saka eventually receiving the ball, who drives down the line and delivers a really good cutback for Alexander Lacazette to finish the move off superbly. Now let's look at qualitative superiority, and this is essentially trying to get your star players in advantageous positions. And a good way to demonstrate this particular principle is by looking at Arsenal's opening goal against Tottenham in the North London derby last season at the Emirates Stadium. As you can see on your screen right now, Martin Odegaard is in possession of the ball, but notice the run that Aubameyang is making on the blind side of Eric Dyer, and how it's forcing Reguilon to come a lot more narrow. This means Saka now has time and space to receive the ball and to get out of his feet quickly. Once he does that, it is then down on Reguilon to stop Saka from performing that next devastating action. But what we have here is a clear qualitative superiority, because Bukayo Saka, as we all know, is a very unpredictable player. He's capable of beating his man on the outside and delivering a cutback, or drifting inwards and having a shot at goal, or delivering a cross towards the back post. Whereas Reguilon, we know he is a player who has deficiencies without the ball. This is a clear advantage Arsenal have, and they capitalise on this situation brilliantly, with Bukayo Saka taking the ball on the outside, beating Reguilon and delivering a really good cutback for Emil Emil Smith Rowe to convert and make it 1-0 to Arsenal. But now let's look at the third superiority that we're going to talk about, which is positional. And with positional superiority, you are able to demonstrate this particular principle by having players between the lines and in space that they can exploit. And this is usually done through your own structure. So let's look at Arsenal in terms of the structure that they deploy in build-up. And what they do is they utilize a 2-3-2-3 shape. And the front three consists of two wingers who are high and wide, who are stretching the pitch both horizontally and vertically, whilst the centre forward will either push the back line deeper or he will drop deep and create an overload in midfield, trying to give the team a man advantage in the middle of the park. So let's expand on this further and take a look at a specific example against Manchester City at the Emirates last season. And as you can see on your screen right now, Aaron Ramsdale has the ball at his feet. And notice how in that first phase, Arsenal are looking to build out from the back in a 2-3 shape. Now, one of the key principles of positional play is to essentially attract pressure, force the opposition to come towards you, bait them, and then exploit space that is now opened up in other areas of the pitch. And that is exactly what Arsenal do in this situation. You can see Manchester City are looking to make it difficult for Arsenal to play out from the back. They're looking to force silly mistakes in build-up. And whilst this is an effective approach and one that has given Manchester City sustained success under Pep Guardiola, there are obvious weaknesses in terms of space now being opened up in behind higher up the pitch. Now, in order to make the most out of these situations, you need players across the backline who are capable of performing progressive actions, and Aaron Ramsdale does exactly that with an inch-perfect long pass for Martinelli to latch onto. Martinelli takes control of the ball superbly, and notice how, because he's operating on that last line, because he is being utilised as a touchline winger, he is pushing that Manchester City back four deeper, which is opening up spaces between the lines for Lacazette, Odegaard and Saka to exploit. And in other words, Arsenal's structure in terms of their 2-3-2-3 shape has given them the opportunity to gain positional superiority. It's also worth mentioning how this is an example of qualitative superiority because of how Martinelli has found himself in a 1v1 situation against Cancelo, a player who is excellent on the ball but has clear weaknesses without it, particularly in terms of defending in isolation, whereas Martinelli is a player who's capable of creating with very little service, and he certainly has the better of his man in this scenario. As he drives inside, he plays the ball to Lacazette, who then feeds Odegaard, who is brought down by Edison eventually, but unfortunately for Arsenal, they aren't awarded a penalty. But notice how in this sequence Arsenal demonstrate a number of superiorities and how they are able to create a very good opportunity against an elite team. So there we have it, the three forms of superiority: numerical, qualitative and positional. However, there are two other forms of advantages as well that aren't really spoken about a lot, but I believe are also very important, and that is dynamic superiority and cooperative superiority.
If you want to hear Rohan talk about dynamic and cooperative superiorities, click the link in the description and it'll take you to that bonus content. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So, why should you care about all this? Some people just won't care about this, have stopped watching, and that's absolutely fine. Go watch the football, have a pint and enjoy your weekend. Life's too short and it's possibly the most healthy way of looking at this sport for what it is, entertainment. But if you read articles and watch these types of videos in your spare time, you clearly have a desire to learn more about the game. The critical observing eye in Einstein's analogy applies a set of parameters of judgment to the fish's abilities that are not suitable or fair, thus creating a negative effect on the fish, but crucially warping their perception of the fish's abilities and decreasing their analytical acuity. If that observing eye could see what the fish's abilities are, what it's attempting to do, how it's trying to do it, applying a fairer set of parameters of assessment, then the observer gains insight and better understands what it is watching. Removing the analogy, if you understand more and more dimensions about what Mikel and the team are at least trying to do, from as many angles as you can, tactically, business-wise, financially, structurally, coaching-wise, development-wise, you can see why we lost the game, or why that transfer worked out that way, or what the strategy is with this player or the other. You can spot patterns, see the competitive landscape even clearer, and better predict how your beloved football club will do over the next days, weeks, months, and years. And most likely the fish will feel better now it's not expected to climb a tree. Lucky fish. That, to me, is why I think the more invested fan should care about this stuff. In my opinion, it's clarifying, and I think with anything in life, the more you understand the complexities of something, the more beautiful it gets. I in no way pretend I understand everything about this. I am not a football coach. I'm a fan trying to learn and sharing with other fans. But in Dr. Carol S. Dweck's million-copy best-selling book, Mindset, she uses the framing device of two types of mindsets. A fixed mindset, the idea that one is fixed and unchangeable in terms of discovery of self and the world, and a growth mindset, the opposite. Adopting the latter in relation to football, and indeed anything, open to discover new concepts, ways of looking at the game and more. As hard as that can be sometimes, to my mind, it makes the game much more enjoyable. And in the end, football should be just that. Enjoyable. Thank you so much for watching The Different Knock. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please consider supporting us on Patreon monthly or head to buymeacoffee.com for one-time support. You can find me at AMOnFootball on Twitter, and we're at DiffKnock on all social media. Also, check out our podcast. All the links are in the video description. Thanks!